I'm Rick Murphy, CEO and founder of Cogent Growth Partners. If you're a technology services provider or an MSP thinking about growth, acquisitions, and how to achieve a realistic liquidity strategy or an eventual exit, this show is for you. This is Cogent Conversations.
Great, George. So again, when an MSP is ready to sell and why they have to do it, let's talk about the financial reality, the real math questions they need to ask themselves. Does the MSP really actually need to know what their EBITDA is?
Yeah, that would be helpful. And it's still typical nowadays that people don't really know what that is. And it swings in both directions. I've seen people ripping themselves off, and I've seen others going way overboard on what they think is true. Yeah, big time. And they're just getting misinformation or conflating what's being said. It's better to have somebody else from the outside take a look at that, because you really could be missing things. But you also could be fooling yourself. So unfortunately, I see a lot of people where they've been working the last 5 years thinking that their EBITDA is X and it keeps changing positively. And I look at it and I'm like, your EBITDA was never what you think it is right now. I don't know who told you this, and they're plugging that into some formula that somebody gave them and they think they're worth Y. And first off, back to prior part of the conversation, it's not that easy to begin with. Those are only rules of thumb if A, B, C, and D are true. And if you don't know what A, B, C, and D are, then you have no idea if that holds true. But knowing what your EBITDA is and that you're doing it correctly is most certainly the start. But it doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, there's a lot more to it. That's just the very beginning. You can have $1 million in EBITDA for real. That doesn't mean everybody's going to buy your company, because where did the $1 million come from? What kind of work do you do? There's a certain level of recurring that you need. Is that recurring more from the labor side than the recurring resale or licensing and things like that, which are not the same? Most people treat that as product, especially if there's a lot of it. So these things all come into play. It's just all the EBITDA is the first marker of buyer X needs to see at least this to even bother looking at you. But that's just one of 2 or 3 things that if they don't, these 5 bullets, these 4 bullets, if it doesn't fit that, which with EBITDA being one of them, they're not going to look at you anyway. It doesn't matter. It's not some automatic type of thing, but that is the first thing to do, is know what that is and know the accuracy behind that. Most companies don't have this problem, but EBITDA can be accidentally manipulated just because of the fact that free cash flow is the thing that goes into the real formulas, because EBITDA is not a GAAP principle. It is a way that was invented to compare companies. Right. So, and to gloat about what they paid for something. It's turned into a little bit more than that over the years, but it still goes back to service companies. Usually EBITDA is a fairly good proxy for free cash flow, because you don't have a lot of weird things going on in the books. It's pretty close. They're not asset intensive type of things, unless you're talking about like a data center or something like that. So EBITDA is usually a pretty good marker, but sometimes it's really not telling all of the story, and a buyer is going to dig into that even more. And it might turn out that EBITDA is not going to actually get you where you want to go either. So there's just a lot to it, and you're better off knowing for real, and knowing that you're doing it accurately, and knowing what somebody might pay based on that and all of the other things that we're talking about before put together, plus the cherry picking of time. Okay, $1 million now, I can see in the next 12 months, you're going to be back to the 800 you normally are. There's nothing wrong with that. It's still very good, but you're cherry picking that $1 million. Let's figure that out, because you're not going to get paid based off of that. The buyer has to do better. So really, really important to understand what goes into it, what doesn't go into it, and how people are going to adjust that along the way to come up with what they're okay with using to determine a deal structure.
Yeah, I come from HTG Evolve and Service Leadership and the adjusted EBITDA. And generally speaking, for the smaller MSPs, the owners were not paying themselves enough. So the adjusted EBITDA was this kind of formula that made that made it a bit more realistic. You did say that EBITDA is not GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. It's a term kind of financial people made up, but adjusted EBITDA. And I talked to a roll-up firm yesterday who says they only look at adjusted EBITDA. After they look at the books, what their EBITDA is. That's probably a common practice.
Yeah, no, adjusted EBITDA is truly when people say EBITDA and M&A, that's typically what they're talking about.
Right.
It's properly adjusted EBITDA. Some people are led to believe that they can just take themselves out, or they're okay with Bob the engineer worked here for 9 months. Bob left. I'm going to take Bob's entire salary out for this trailing 12. And then I'm going to ask, well, are you going to rehire for Bob? Yeah, and it's probably going to cost me more. Then you can't take Bob out. As a matter of fact, we need to put more money in. So not understanding this, not doing it nefariously, but not getting it is quite a problem. There's other things that people don't understand. I live in the world also where I talk with a lot of folks from Evolve and whatnot and SLI.
Yeah.
But the thing that's often missing in a growing company is, so when I hear there's 3 owners in a business, not necessarily a bad thing, but to me, that means there's at least 3 people working more than one job. And they're doing it because they can and they're willing to work 90 hours a week. Good for you. That's terrific. But if you want to play with the big boys, bigger company that's going to buy you, their infrastructure is completely different. You're making the money you're making because you're not hiring people. You're doing the work yourself. Or the other term is you're not investing in things you should invest. So full well, I don't want to hire a sales guy. So I have no sales, I have no marketing, and I'm saving myself $200,000 a year. Great. The buyer can't do that. So they're going to adjust things, and your adjusted EBITDA, so this is where the adjustment goes the opposite direction, is for me to buy you, I have to take away some of what you think you have because I'm going backwards. So let's go back to what I said before. Every buyer is buying because they're getting better. And if you're at X EBITDA, they need to see X plus in most cases. Yes, there's things like arbitrage and whatnot for your much bigger deals, but they're also probably not buying you unless you are a growing company. So they're still getting that plus, like I said before. They might not have to do any consolidation, but they're getting some synergies. They're getting the growth opportunity that they can layer on. Plus, you're bringing it to them. There's always a plus. If it's stagnant or moving backwards, or they have to move it backwards, you're not getting the price that you think. And these are the true adjustments to EBITDA. So even if you think you adjusted EBITDA completely correct, and you might be right, the buyer might not see things exactly the same way. And that is often a major disappointment to a lot of people because, again, they're hanging their hat on certain stuff. And it's kind of correct, but when you get down to it, it's not. And things don't work out the way they thought. And it's kind of disappointing.
Let's talk about revenue, George. So how much of is it, truly recurring versus contract? Verbal agreements, they just don't count. The buyers want predictability.
Yes. So every buyer has their own version, and even we do, of what we're okay with and what we're not okay with. You can have a great piece of paper with a 30-day out, but it says it's there for 3 years. It's a 30-day contract. But then you have the longevity of, well, they've renewed this 3-year deal twice. So they've been here for a while. Okay, cool. The stickiness is a plus. Now the buyer has to deal with, well, how sticky is that when you're not running it anymore. Back to what I said before about the owner not being there, and the risk profile that you got to understand is not there when you're sitting there, but becomes a risk profile to a buyer. So there's ways to get around it. If the company is good or very good, a buyer will take those things into account. Maybe the price will be a little bit less, but honestly, it's not so much the price. If it's truly recurring revenue, not reoccurring revenue or just sort of contracted, type of stuff, that'll come into play with the stickiness, but it'll also come into play with the deal structure. So maybe I can still give you $8 million for your company, but I was going to give you more of it down. Now I'm going to give you a little bit less of that down and put a little more structure because, no offense, I can't take your word for the fact that when I come in here, nothing's going to happen. And everybody's on the same page. You got to be okay with that as a seller to understand that I set this up. I made it like this. It works great for me. I got to understand it doesn't work great for the buyer. And if you're under that understanding, then you'll already be ready for the fact that you're probably going to have to do some risk mitigation. You could still get a good price. You could still get the price you thought, but it's going to come with some kind of an earnout or a client retention bonus, or all kinds of different things that we call stuff that basically say, if it's not here, I'm not paying for it. I'll pay for it up to this level, but it's got to be solid. And the other thing that people don't understand with that is there's not one buyer on the planet that's being an honest buyer, an honest broker, if you will, that sets things up to be unobtainium. They should not be doing unobtainium. Unobtainium is pie in the sky stuff. Yeah, it's nobody thinks anybody's going to get that. But if you do, great, I'll give you that. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about risk mitigation. That should not be unobtainium. It should be something that is a bar that you probably don't have to jump. You have to maybe take a high step, maybe a medium step to get over, just to make sure that I'm getting what I paid for. And back to that, buyer does that not to say, I really hope he doesn't do it and I don't have to pay him. Why would they want to do that? If the setup is really smells like that, okay, then you shouldn't sign that deal to begin with. But a buyer, they want to, my clients, we all want to pay you more money. Like, here's a way to do better. Not only do I want you to get this, I want to do better, because I'm going to be as mad as you if you don't make this, because I still paid money. And I still paid probably a little more than I wanted to, even though this is supposed to mitigate the risk. Mitigate doesn't mean eliminate. It means we're both still taking a risk, and I don't want this to happen. So, that's the fun stuff that happens when you get into that, scenario that you just described.
Yeah, it definitely could be tricky.
This is Cogent Conversations.